Hello again, fifth grade. I have had some questions, and I went over this in the morning meeting, but I'm recording it just in case you weren't in morning meetings or still had questions. One of the big questions for the week was about the interactive notebook. And then another question is also about printing off materials. And I know those have kind of been big questions, so I'm going to explain both of those in this video, and hopefully that helps you guys. So when you go into a lesson, there's within the lesson, there's activities that you can be printed off and you can do them on a sheet of paper. I know some people have concerns that they don't have a printer or they don't necessarily want to print those off just because of costs and whatnot, or that the Chromebook doesn't connect to a printer so they can't print it off. And that is fine. If you do not print off those pages, that will not affect you. It will not affect your grade, and it is not required. So again, printing is not required, and will not necessarily be graded. So we're going to go into Buzz. I'm going to share my screen with you. And I'm going to show you what I mean by the pages that you print, the activities, and then also the interactive notebook. So we're just going to go into our first course, English Language Arts. It's always the sample course that we seem to get started with. So we're going to know that course really well. So once we get into the course, here's our must-dos for the week up on our landing page. And we're going to scroll down past our landing page and get into our module 1, which is for this week is where we're starting. So if we get into module 1 and we go into, you've already taken the pretest, should have already done the weekly review survey last week. We're going to get into module 1, lesson 1. So these icons, I explained it in the last video, but I'll explain it again. If it's a blank white icon, that means it's instructions and you simply read through it. There's nothing to turn in for that. If it has the checklist, that is a quiz, and that will be submitted after you answer all the questions, and that will be graded. So blank is the instructions, checklist is the quiz, and then there's one more that is just a page that has the rectangle in the middle. That is a lesson. So we have instructions, quiz, lesson. The lessons are what you go through that have all the activities, and it's the lesson for the week essentially, and they each have different things for you guys to learn. And so if we're going to just go ahead and go into a lesson, because that's where the questions mostly are about the interactive reader and printing off the activities. So if we go ahead and go into this, we can see that this lesson is 12 pages. And so it has a lot of different things in it. It has stories, activities, and vocabulary. It has lots of things to do. And as you read through it, you'll see that. So if we start reading through it, we'll read through the instructions and we'll come down to an activity. Okay, would you rather read a book in the sand, swim in the waves? And you can click on either of those. Okay, would you rather? So that's one of the activities you can do, which this activity, whether you complete it or not, is up to you and it is not graded because it's part of a lesson. Okay, here's what you will learn in this lesson. We're going to go on to the next page. Word wisdom context clues. Okay, it has some instructions. And when you see an unknown word, there is no time to pout. Look at sounds and syllables. Bring your toolbox out. Okay, here's another activity. A try it. And an answer. Okay, so this is kind of the idea of a lesson. You go through the lesson, you read through instructions, and you do different activities. Some of the activities are activities that it asks you to do within an interactive notebook. So when it says interactive notebook, let's see, I'm trying to find one of them. Okay, what does the paragraph tell you about how Carolina feels about her job at the aquarium? Use the text selector tool in the interactive toolbox to highlight any evidence that supports your inference. Then check your answers. So there's these questions that need to be answered somewhere, can be answered somewhere. They're optional. Again, they are not graded, at least for this lesson. If they are going to be graded, I will make that known and it will be in an assignment. But as far as these questions and activities throughout the lesson, there's things that you can do in your interactive notebook. And when they say interactive notebook, I want to clarify. The interactive notebook is simply a composition notebook, a spiral notebook, a binder. Okay, it's not something that I'm going to give you. It's not something that Buzz has on it. It is something that's provided from home. And so I would encourage that as your students are going through, as you students or your students, if you're a parent watching this video, that as you go through the lessons, that you have a spiral notebook, a binder with paper, you have something right there to answer questions and do activities in. I'm actually going to go out and give another example. We're going to go into lesson 2 because that has a good example of how to use your interactive notebook. So if we go down into module 1, lesson 2 of our English language arts this week and open it up to our lesson, there are some activities. Okay, here's our first page telling us what we're going to learn this week with a few instructions. If we go into the second page, there's cursive. And in the cursive, again, you can print out these cursive writing anchor charts. You can print these things out, or you can just grab your spiral notebook and the student, you students or your students, may go ahead and practice their cursive in their interactive notebook. They don't need to print out the pages unless that's what you guys want to do. But in their interactive notebooks, in their spiral notebooks, they can go ahead and complete these activities. If we go to the next page, I'm going to skip a couple of pages ahead because there's a good chart that's within the lesson. There's this chart, and they don't fill it out within the lesson. It's not something they can do right here online, but this is something they could copy down into their spiral notebook and fill out as they're going through the lesson. So I just want to reiterate, the interactive notebook is not in Buzz, and it's not something that I'm going to give you. It's just simply a paper, pencil kind of material that can be used throughout the lesson. And I really encourage using an interactive notebook, just using a spiral notebook to take notes and to follow along with the lesson. That way you can become more engaged with the content. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here and end with making the points again. Printing is not required. It won't be required throughout this course because of the complications with all of the printing, with whether you have a printer or not, whether the Chromebook connects to your printer, things like that. So printing is not required. If you want to print off those activities and do them within the lesson, awesome, go for it. If you do not want to print, I would encourage that you get a spiral notebook, a binder, a composition notebook, and use those to take notes and fill in, do the activities within that notebook as you are doing the lesson. So hopefully that answers questions about printing and interactive notebooks. Thanks. Talk to you later.